Sharpening after the fact in Photoshop. This comes from the digital photography book written by Scott Kelby. Photoshop has a tool, and I know some of you don't have Photoshop, and don't worry, but I want you to make note of what we have available. Scott Kelby sharpens all of his photos. And it's interesting because one would think that's not necessarily needed, but Photoshop allows us to make the photos look even sharper by adding this sharpening effect. And in Photoshop, it's called Unsharp Mask. It's an Unsharp mask filter. And it sounds funny because you would think unsharp would make it not sharp, it would make them blurry, but it doesn't. And it comes from those traditional darkroom techniques. It's really easy to use. So in Photoshop, I have my photo open here, and there are different suggestions for people, for cityscapes, and for general use. And I do have these noted under lecture in week 8, so you can reference them there later. In Photoshop, you're going to actually go under the filter menu, and you're going to choose Sharpen, and here is where the Unsharpened Mask lives. So I'm going to choose Unsharpened Mask. A dialog box will appear, and I'll just move this pretty close by so you can kind of do a comparison here. You may or may not see this. This one doesn't need to be sharpened all that much, but we're going to pretend this is a portrait. So when this dialog box opens, there are 3 sliders for applying different sharpening parameters. And so these are the settings that Scott Kelby gives us that he has found works absolutely fabulous. And Scott Kelby is a very well-known photographer, so I would tend to believe that his suggestions are credible. So the amount for people is 150. So I'm going to type in 150 here. And for the radius, I'm going to press my tab key actually to go down to the radius. And these are measured in pixels. I'm going to keep that at 1. And the threshold, I'm going to go to 10. I'm going to press tab one more time to apply those settings. And if you can see, it's probably a bit difficult in this video, but if you can see around the eye and especially in the little feather here, you can see that this is a lot more crisp. So what the Unsharpened Mask is doing is it's increasing the contrast on those edge pixels. Actually under the beak you can see too as well in those little bits of feathers that we see under there. A little bit blurrier here, a little bit more crisp in that Unsharp Mask dialog box. So that's a really great way that you can apply sharpening. I'm going to click OK. Not a huge difference. It's not going to crisp up a blurry photo, but it will tighten things up. Now for a landscape or cityscape, we're going to go to this picture again. We're going to go under Filter and Sharpen and Unsharpened Mask, and my dialog box again will open up. So in a cityscape, the settings that he suggests for cityscapes, urban photography, or travel, the amount here at 65%, the radius is at 3 this time, and the threshold at 2. Okay, and so what this does is it just tightens up a bit of the edges. Again, I imagine that in here you can see a little bit of more crisp, tight edges. If I click OK, there you can see it. The last one I'm going to show you is for general everyday photography. Kind of if it's not people and it's not a cityscape or urban scape, then we can use this general everyday use. So again, I'm going to go under Filter and I'm going to go to Sharpen and Unsharpened Mask. And in this case, we're going to choose for our amount 85. The radius here is going to be back at 1. And the threshold this time is at 4. Okay, so this will take your general use photography and crisp it up a bit. And there it is. Just makes it be a little bit tighter. Now in this case, and I noticed in my resort photo, it almost seems as though it went maybe just a little bit far. And sometimes you can get some really bad halos, or what we call color artifacts, that kind of, it happens when you're sharpening, and it's just because of that contrast that's happening between pixels. It's just too stark of a contrast. So if we've applied this Unsharp mask using the settings, and we want to just go back a little bit, we can choose to fade that effect. So under the Edit menu is actually the Fade Unsharpen mask. And this will allow us to pull back a bit on those settings. So we're going to take the fade, but we're not going to do an opacity amount here. I mean, I can do that, but that's not what we're looking for. We're just going to go to mode, and we're choosing luminosity, lightness and darkness, luminosity. And we're fading the luminosity. So from normal to luminosity, and click OK. And a lot of times that's just going to help that luminosity area of your photo, not just the color areas. So by doing this, we can avoid the color halos and other bad results that happen from sharpening a color image. I'm going to do this one more time in the Sanibel Resort, because I feel as though we're getting some artifacts happening here on the edges. Okay, so now if I've just applied the unsharpened mask, I can go up to Edit, and I can fade it. And again, I'm going to change it from normal to luminosity, and click OK. So it feels as though it kind of takes back a little bit, and it helps with some of that halos or the color artifacts that were happening in the edge areas. So this is a way that you can utilize sharpening after the fact in Photoshop. This also works in Photoshop Elements, which is that semi-pro version of Photoshop. It's a great tip to kind of keep in the back of your mind for adjusting your photos.